"Lena, let's call off the wedding." My fiancé Ezra Lee stood before me, his factory supervisor's uniform impeccably pressed, his brow slightly furrowed. The face I once loved deeply now filled me with waves of nausea. 2 weeks ago, Myra was harassed by some thugs at the branch factory. The doctor said her constitution is weak. An abortion would kill her. I must marry her. He raised his eyes, his gaze resolute, immersed in his own heroic rescue fantasy. If I don't marry her, how will she survive? The memory was like a knife, brutally stabbing into my heart. In my past life, when I heard these words, I cried my heart out, clutching his sleeve desperately, refusing to let go. The wedding proceeded as planned. But 3 days later, news of Myra Ning's suicide by drowning spread throughout the factory. What did Ezra Lee say back then? "Lena, she was just too fragile. Don't take it to heart." 10 years. For 10 years, he played the role of a devoted husband, climbing the ranks step by step through my family's connections until he finally became the new factory director. Right up to the very end, he personally escorted me, heavily pregnant, onto the struggle platform, charging me with leaking the factory's core technology abroad, a crime punishable by death. My fingers unconsciously brushed over my flat abdomen, where his child had once grown, 7 months old, a vibrant life. Yet it never even got the chance to see this world. Through tears, I demanded of him, even if he wanted me dead, he should have waited until I gave birth. The child was innocent. He only said coldly, "This is fate. I don't need a child whose birth mother has a stain." "Lena, are you listening?" Ezra Lee's voice pulled me back to reality, with a hint of impatience in his tone. "I know you must be unwilling," he sighed, as if indulging a misbehaving child. "But don't you bear some responsibility for Myra ending up like this?" I almost burst into laughter, my chest churning with overwhelming hatred. What responsibility do I bear? I heard my own voice, cold as ice. If you hadn't suddenly returned from the countryside and exposed Myra's background, how could she have made a mistake due to excessive grief and been transferred to the branch factory? How could she have encountered such misfortune? He frowned, his tone growing heavier. "Lena Ning, you can't be so selfish in life." "Selfish?" I stared at him intently. "Compared to you, Ezra Lee, who climbed the ladder using my father's power and then personally sent me, pregnant with your child, to my death, what does my selfishness even amount to? Moreover, I, the true heiress, suffered in the countryside for 18 years. After finally being found and brought back, is it now my fault? Myra Ning drugged me and schemed to have me defiled by the local ruffians at the factory. Is that also my fault? So what are you implying?" I asked softly, the corner of my lips curling slightly. "I really want to see just how shameless this man can be." "Let's call off the engagement," he said as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Myra needs me now. After all, you're Director Ning's own daughter. Your family will take care of you for life. But she can't live without me." He paused, his tone even carrying a hint of condescension. "You should go tell Director Ning later that you don't like me anymore and want to break off the engagement. Consider it your way of atoning." In his eyes, I owed Myra Ning an apology. In my past life, I was determined to marry him. Did that mean, in his eyes, I had committed an even greater sin, which led to the heartless reckoning 10 years later and that dismissive remark, "It's just fate. This time around, I want to see where the fate of you two scoundrels will lead without my determination." "All right," I nodded, my voice unexpectedly cheerful. "I agree, let's call off the engagement." He froze, his pupils contracting slightly, clearly not expecting me to be so decisive. "Go marry Myra Ning," I said with a smile, enunciating each word clearly and distinctly. "I wish you both a harmonious union lasting 100 years." His expression shifted from shock to suspicion, finally settling into a covert, nauseating smugness. The contempt in my heart grew even stronger. Did he think I was letting him go out of love, enduring the pain for his sake? Soon he'll realize that what I'm granting him is a one-way ticket to eternal damnation. But, I shifted my tone, clearly seeing the smugness freeze on his face. "I'll be telling Dad the whole truth later. That it was you, Ezra Lee, who proposed breaking off the engagement. Why should I cover for you?" The fake tenderness in Ezra Lee's eyes vanished instantly. replaced by barely contained fury, like a dog whose tail had been stepped on. Lena Ning, I actually thought you'd finally grown a conscience. He snarled, his face twisting. Turns out selfishness is carved into your bones. Is smearing my name in front of Director Ning really that important to you? I stared at him and suddenly found it ridiculous. Did he think I was still that foolish Lena Ning, who used to have eyes only for him and would feel heartbroken over his slightest frown? Telling my father the truth counts as slandering you. I chuckled. You doing such things isn't selfish, but me recounting what you did is, Ezra Lee. Your skin is thicker than a city wall. But soon, Ezra Lee forced himself to calm down, even managing a confident smile on his face. Go ahead and say whatever you want. He leisurely adjusted the collar of his work uniform. As for whether Director Ning's reaction will be as you hope, we'll see. With that, he turned and walked away, his back as straight as a pine tree. No, my heart suddenly skipped a beat, and a chill ran down my spine. Ezra Lee has always been cautious and cunning, caring most about his reputation and future prospects. Otherwise, in his past life, he wouldn't have put on an act for a full decade, waiting until he became the new factory director and his power was firmly secured before finally striking me down. Given his nature, it's impossible for him to be so indifferent about me going to find my father, unless he already has something to rely on. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms, the sharp pain forcing me to stay calm. I must find father first, but I had only taken a few steps when I ran into the factory office messenger hurrying toward me. Comrade Ning, he said in a hushed voice, his expression unusually grave, the factory director just received a notice to attend an emergency production meeting in the capital. He won't be back for 2 days. My whole body stiffened, and my blood seemed to freeze in an instant. In my past life, father had clearly cancelled all meetings and social engagements just so he could personally oversee my wedding and witness my happiness. But now, he was suddenly called away by an urgent meeting. This sudden change, could Ezra Lee also be? But I quickly dismissed this absurd thought. In my past life, we shared a bed for 10 years. I knew his every move, every subtle expression, down to my bones. When we met just now, his demeanor, tone, and even the habitual gesture of frowning were exactly the same as in his previous life at this time. If it were him who had been reborn, he would never react like this. He would be more meticulous and better at acting. Lost in thought, familiar footsteps echoed from the end of the corridor. Lena, my brother, dressed in a white lab coat, looked at me with a furrowed brow, his eyes filled with concern. Mom died during childbirth when I was born, which is why my brother became a doctor. He's also the one who cares for me the most in this family. It's about Ezra Lee, isn't it? He submitted an application yesterday to bring Myra Ning back from the branch factory. It's changed again. The course of events has once again deviated from the trajectory of my previous life. I was going to reject it outright. My brother's voice was barely above a whisper, laced with suppressed anger. But he produced an official certificate from the clinic, stating that Myra Ning had suddenly fallen seriously ill there and needed immediate treatment at the main factory hospital. Sick, not earlier, not later, but just a few days before Ezra Lee was about to break off the engagement and marry her. I stared fixedly at the application, the edges of the paper crumpling under my tight grip. In my past life, I don't know if Myra Ning was ever sick, but I clearly remember that she died alone at the branch factory. Ezra Lee certainly never tried to secretly bring her back before that. Brother, my voice tightened slightly, the unease in my heart growing stronger. This matter, it's very suspicious. My brother cut me off decisively. I noticed something was off with Ezra Lee 2 months ago and advised you to reconsider the wedding date. But you at the time, he trailed off, but I didn't need to ask to know. The me who hadn't been reborn, the me who was blinded by love, must have stubbornly believed my brother was overthinking it. I probably even had a huge fight with him over Ezra Lee. Breaking his heart, my brother took a deep breath and pulled out another copy of a lab report. The paper trembled slightly between his slender fingers. This is the pregnancy test report that just came in this morning. His voice was as cold as ice. Myra Ning, 6 weeks pregnant, 6 weeks. Ezra Lee had just claimed she was harassed by thugs half a month ago. Yet this report in black and white shows she's already 6 weeks pregnant, and just a month and a half ago, Ezra Lee happened to be away from the factory for 3 full days under the pretext of attending regional training. I stared fixedly at the report, my fingertips turning cold. 2 years ago, when I had just been brought back to the Ning family from the countryside. There was clearly no ambiguity between Ezra Lee and Myra Ning that went beyond sibling affection. They had grown up together in the staff compound since childhood, their relationship so pure that even my father and brother could see it clearly. That was precisely why, when Ezra Lee showed his fervent pursuit of me, the family nodded in approval without hesitation. But now, most likely, this child is Ezra Lee's. My brother's voice was like a sharp knife, cruelly slicing open the bloody reality and stabbing into my already scarred heart. As I listened to my brother analyze the child's biological father, a dense, suffocating pain welled up in my heart. The previous life ended so tragically that I had long understood the special place Myra Ning held in Ezra Lee's heart. Little did I know that during these 2 years of our passionate love, he had already been entangled in such a filthy and despicable affair with this woman, 2 years ago. Myra Ning drugged me shortly after I returned to the Ning family, plotting to have me ruined by a local ruffian so that my reputation would be destroyed, leaving me with no choice but to hastily marry the man she had arranged for me, in that corner of the factory. The dull thud of Ezra Lee's leather shoe kicking the metal barrel as he knocked the ruffian away became, for a time, the clearest salvation in my life. Later, everyone in the factory said that Ezra Lee only treated Myra Ning as an immature little sister, while his heart was deeply devoted to me. I had just returned to the city and couldn't keep up with the production schedule, so he arrived at the workshop 2 hours early every day, simplifying complex part diagrams and operation procedures into small cards I could understand. Once during an emergency night shift repair, the few cards he hastily handed me still carried the warmth from his palms. He had drawn them for me stroke by stroke, leaning over the cold lathe under the dim workshop light. That's why in my past life, even when Ezra Lee said he wanted to break off our engagement to marry Myra Ning, I naively believed it was just his reluctance to hurt his little sister. But it turned out he had already betrayed me long ago. I closed my eyes, forcibly suppressing the surging hatred and nausea. When I opened them again, my gaze was icy clear. Myra Ning's gestational weeks and Ezra Lee's full of holes lies are the sharpest blades to tear off their hypocritical masks. But before I could even act, vicious rumors about me had already begun buzzing through the employee housing complex like flies. Have you heard? The biological daughter the Ning family just got back. What a cruel heart she has. Not only did she force Myra to transfer to a branch factory, but she even, exactly, my cousin, who's a doctor, saw it with her own eyes. Myra was covered in injuries. Poor thing. TSK, a sparrow suddenly flying onto a high branch forgets its place. What disgraceful behavior. Ezra Lee is such a good man, even gave up his engagement to the factory director's daughter to save someone. Now that's a real man. The malicious gossip spread like wildfire overnight, reaching every corner of the staff compound. In the cafeteria, the usually cheerful auntie who served meals deliberately snorted loudly when I came to get my food today. She turned her head to whisper something to the person next to her, her eyes like venomous needles piercing through me. My brother was so furious that he slammed the table during the factory meeting. What kind of person my sister is? None of you have the right to gossip about her here, but his strong defense only fueled the rumors further. Dr. Ning is so protective of his biological sister that he's turned a blind eye. No wonder poor Myra has suffered so much. Dr. Ning is young and impulsive, blinded by blood ties. But Director Ning might be different. After all, Myra is the daughter he raised for 18 years. There's real affection there. Exactly. When the old man returns from the capital and learns about this mess, who knows how heartbroken he'll be for Myra. Ezra Lee barged into the Ning family's small building with Myra Ning, who appeared too fragile to take care of herself, while the courtyard was packed with employees' family members who had rushed over upon hearing the news to watch the spectacle. Myra Ning's wrist was wrapped in blood-stained gauze, her face as pale as paper. She clung desperately to Ezra Lee's arm, her eyes unfocused as she muttered to herself, "Blood, it's everywhere. So terrifying." Comrade Ning, Ezra Lee straightened his back, dressed in work clothes, with an air of righteous indignation. "Myra attempted suicide by cutting her wrist last night. The doctor said if she had been brought in half an hour later, she wouldn't have made it." I stood under the corridor, a barely perceptible sneer tugging at the corner of my lips. My brother rushed over from the factory hospital, his white coat still stained with blood from treating a worker's wound. He frowned as he glanced at Myra Ning's wrist, then suddenly reached out and precisely grasped her pulse point. "Brother." Myra Ning screamed and struggled like a startled rabbit, but her brother's iron-like grip held her firmly in place, leaving her unable to move. Her brother frowned, his expression focused and grave. Seeing this, Myra Ning rolled her eyes and seized the opportunity. She abruptly tore off the bandage on her wrist, revealing a hideous and terrifying wound, from which blood gushed out eagerly. Blood, blood, so much blood. My pupils constricted abruptly. This woman, who had always been delicate and would complain of exhaustion from carrying a thermos, actually went to such extreme lengths to achieve her goal. "Ezra." She swayed and collapsed weakly into Ezra Lee's broad embrace. "I dreamed of those street thugs. They came for me again." "Ah!" The increasingly shrill scream pierced the eardrums, causing physical pain. In the courtyard, several soft-hearted family members couldn't hold back their tears, all beginning to criticize the Ning family's heartlessness. "Let Myra go home to recover." Ezra Lee seized the moment to shout righteously, "No matter what. The Ning family wouldn't be so cruel as to drive their own daughter, raised for 18 years, to her death, would they?" These words were like a spark landing in a pot of boiling oil, intensifying the murmurs and pointing fingers of the onlooking crowd. "Let her stay." At that moment, I suddenly spoke up, my voice cutting clearly through all the noise. Brother looked at me in surprise, his eyes filled with confusion and concern. He must have been thinking, how could this malicious impostor be worthy of stepping through the Ning family's threshold even one more time? But I quietly squeezed his palm, signaling him to relax. "I know it all too well in my heart. In my past life, when I was accused of leaking the factory's secrets to foreign countries, those gloating voices still ring sharply in my ears to this day. She's just a wild child raised in the countryside. Her thinking was never pure to begin with." Exactly. The Myra girl the Ning family painstakingly raised for 18 years was so much better. Why did they have to bring back this troublemaker instead? The entire staff compound is now buzzing about how ruthless I am, having driven Myra Ning into a corner. If I were to refuse her outright, wouldn't that just confirm these rumors, giving them more ammunition to attack me and the Ning family? Moreover, I stared at the gruesome wound on Myra Ning's wrist, a cold glint flashing in my eyes. Since she dares to use this self-inflicted suffering to win sympathy and attempt to twist the truth, I'll play along with her little act to the very end. Only by letting her move into the Ning family will her dirty, underhanded tricks be exposed to the light of day even faster. "Brother," I lowered my voice, my tone resolute, "let her stay for a couple of days. When Dad returns, everything will become clear." My brother instantly understood and nodded with a cold expression. A fleeting glint of triumph flashed in Myra Ning's eyes, but she quickly resumed her pitiful act, shrinking further into Ezra Lee's embrace. Watching her disgusting display of hypocrisy, I sneered inwardly, "Myra Ning, your best days are yet to come." That evening, when Ezra Lee came to see me, he still carried the cloying scent of snow cream from Myra Ning's room, so overpowering it nearly made me sick. "Lena," his voice was hoarse, his eyes rimmed with red. "I haven't slept a wink these past few nights. Every time I close my eyes, all I see is your bright laughter. I should be too ashamed to face you, but I truly can't live without you." I recoiled in disgust from his attempt to grab my hand, my tone laced with icy sarcasm. "Director Lee, if you say these words to Myra Ning, she might shed a few crocodile tears of emotion. But don't bother with me. I find it filthy, the child in Myra's belly." He paused for a moment before resuming his hypocritical performance. "Once she gives birth, I'll send her away immediately. We can still." I could no longer endure his shameless, repulsive act. The fury bottled up over 2 lifetimes erupted at this moment. and I raised my hand to deliver a fierce slap across his face. Ezra Lee, have you no shame? How despicable can you be? I glared at him, my voice trembling with rage. When I was devoted to you heart and soul, you took me for granted. Toying with me like a fool in the palm of your hand, now that I don't want you anymore, you've suddenly learned to wag your tail. A vivid red handprint quickly emerged on his ashen face. His eyes filled with wounded disbelief. Even if you hadn't called off the engagement, I stared fixedly at his quivering eyelashes, enunciating each word sharply. With all the filthy business between you and Myra Ning, I should have cut ties with you long ago. Did you break off the engagement and marry her just to save her? Ezra Lee, with so many struggling female workers across the country, why don't you just marry them all and save each one? As soon as the words fell, a sharp sound of shattering glass suddenly echoed through the corridor. Myra Ning stood under the moonlight, a shattered glass and a puddle of water at her feet. She stared fixedly at Ezra Lee, her lips trembling too much to speak. Under the moonlight, Myra Ning's face was contorted like a vengeful ghost that had just returned from hell. At last, she realized that the so-called marriage she had schemed so hard to steal was nothing but a self-deceiving joke. Ezra Lee entangled with her merely because he craved the warmth she willingly offered. Agreeing to marry her was only for the sake of the flesh in her womb that could carry on his family line. But the moment he realized I had completely abandoned him, he panicked. He even shamelessly came crawling back, begging for my forgiveness. Despite contradicting his own words, the man she had staked everything on, even her reputation, turned out to be such a despicable, spineless coward. I snorted coldly, turned my head, and walked away, leaving the messy space to that pair of illicit lovers. Turning the corner of the corridor, I didn't go far but stopped by the wall. Myra Ning's voice was filled with resentment and venom. What's so great about her, Lena Ning? She's just a country bumpkin who grew up in the countryside. 18 years of love between us. Yet the moment she appeared, you couldn't wait to set your eyes on her. What, now that you've used my womb to leave your seed, you're crawling back to her? Ezra Lee remained silent as a stone, letting Myra Ning vent her hysteria. If I hadn't reminded you 6 months ago, your confidential proposal would have been left in the meeting room. That was serious enough to get you disciplined and ruin your life. I saved you, Ezra Lee, you owe me. Hearing this, the blood in my veins froze instantly. In my past life, I was clearly the one who handled this matter. Ezra Lee was utterly terrified at the time, and it was I who rushed around overnight, pleading with my father's old subordinate to quietly retrieve the proposal he had forgotten in the meeting room, thus preserving his reputation. But in this life, with Myra Ning's reminder, this incident never even happened. Suddenly, everything became clear to me. So that's how it is. No wonder father was called away by a fabricated urgent meeting. No wonder Ezra Lee dared to pick her up so blatantly in advance. Myra Ning, you bitch, you actually reincarnated back earlier than me. Are you trying to steal a march and completely take over my life? What a pity, what a pity. You died too early in your past life, so you ultimately know too little. Even if you get to live again, you're still a short-sighted fool. The quarreling in the room gradually died down. I sneered and turned back to my own bedroom. Early the next morning, as soon as I stepped out of my room, I heard sobbing coming from Myra Ning's room, like an annoying mosquito. By evening, she accidentally knocked over a basin of water in the hallway, soaking her nightgown. Sister, she stood trembling at my doorway. My clothes are all soaked. Could I borrow something to change into? I casually tossed her a dress from the wardrobe. She stumbled as she took the clothes. But her eyes remained fixed on the thermos I had placed on the table. A cold laugh rose in my heart. Just as I expected, you seem quite shaken. How about some hot water to calm your nerves? Before she could speak, I deliberately handed her the enamel mug. Her hand trembled uncontrollably as she took it, her pinky nail barely grazing the water's surface. TCH, still the same old dirty tricks. 2 years ago, it was drugging me. Now, to frame me, you'd even drug yourself. Myra Ning. You've really improved, haven't you? The moment the enamel mug touched her lips, I caught the glint of triumph in her eyes. The look of a scheme coming to fruition. How laughable. She thinks she's weaving an elaborate trap. unaware I've seen through her long ago, just the last desperate flailings of a clown. I've repeatedly confirmed with my brother that she is indeed pregnant. Of course, I won't stop this miscarriage-framing act, after all. This illegitimate child is Ezra Lee's own flesh and blood. In my previous life, when I perished together with Ezra Lee, the innocent fetus in my womb also turned to ashes with me. That child didn't even get a chance to see the sunlight of this world. How does a scumbag like Ezra Lee, who killed his own flesh and blood, deserve to have children? And oh, how I truly long, to see it, when he realizes that Myra Ning, the woman who deeply loved him, first clung to him and forced him into marriage with that piece of flesh, and now has killed that bastard child with her own hands just to frame me. What an absolutely spectacular expression will appear on his face. Ah! A piercing scream shattered the quiet night as Myra Ning suddenly clutched her stomach and collapsed to the ground, blood gushing rapidly from between her legs. At that very moment, a booming voice, filled with urgency and joy, rang out from downstairs. "Lena. Dad finally made it back. I won't let anything delay sending my precious daughter off to her wedding in grand style. My child, my child." Myra Ning trembled violently, her blood-stained hands clutching desperately at my pant leg. "Sister, do you hate me this much?" Before I could speak, my father rushed forward, covered in dust from his journey. Behind him, Ezra Lee turned deathly pale at the sight of the blood covering the floor. The man staggered back half a step, his eyes filled with disbelief and terror, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to form words. It seems that in this aborted drama, the male lead was truly kept in the dark, completely unaware. Myra Ning was still pouring her heart out, as if clutching at the last straw of hope, desperately rushing toward her father who had just come upstairs. "Dad, I just wanted to beg my sister to forgive me, to stop being angry with me." But she cried her heart out, trembling as she held up the enamel mug I had given her. She actually drugged the water she gave me. Just like what I foolishly did to her 2 years ago. Ezra Lee rushed forward in a swift stride, carefully cradling her in his arms. When he looked up at me, his bloodshot eyes were filled with fury and disappointment. "Lena Ning, you knew Myra's health was fragile, yet you still heartlessly caused her to miscarry." "Brother Ezra," Myra Ning whispered weakly from his embrace, "don't blame my sister, it's all my fault. I deserve this. 2 years ago, I was blinded by greed and listened to malicious whispers, drugging my sister and nearly causing a disaster. Now that she's returned the favor, we can consider it even." Struggling to sit up from Ezra Lee's arms, she turned toward their father, whose face was frozen in shock, and kowtowed heavily with a resounding thud. "Dad, I know I'm not the Ning family's flesh and blood. I don't expect to receive your love like my sister does. I just beg you to forgive the mistakes I made in my youthful ignorance." Father's gaze first fell on the shocking bloodstains covering the floor, his brows tightly furrowed. Then, his sharp, hawk-like eyes swiftly swept over Myra Ning's deathly pale face and Ezra Lee's anxious expression before finally settling on my calm demeanor, carrying a hint of scrutiny and barely detectable concern. "You weren't married at the branch factory. Where did this child come from?" Father demanded with unquestionable authority. "As for Lena, what possible reason could she have for targeting the fetus in your womb?" Myra Ning's sobbing abruptly ceased, as if brutally wounded by Father's coldness and skepticism. Ezra Lee immediately straightened his back and spoke with righteous indignation, reporting to the factory director. "Myra, while at the branch factory, she unfortunately encountered some local thugs. She spent 2 years in the countryside, lacking food and clothing, her body too weak. This miscarriage, the doctor said it might be life-threatening. I was truly worried something might happen to Myra, so I took it upon myself to bring her back for recovery, but Lena seems to have misunderstood something." I stared at their clasped hands, a cold laugh rising in my heart. What a perfect match made in heaven. One uses the abortion of her illegitimate child as a bargaining chip, putting on a tearful performance. The other uses so-called responsibility and duty as excuses, portraying himself as a hero enduring humiliation. Their coordinated act not only solidifies my reputation as jealous and malicious, but also drapes Ezra Lee's broken engagement and remarriage in a cloak of moral righteousness. At the same time, it capitalizes on Myra Ning's past exile to evoke sympathy and guilt from father. What a brilliantly calculated scheme. Just as they had expected, their father's expression changed slightly after hearing their tearful complaints. Seeing her father's resolve waver, Myra Ning's tears immediately began to fall like broken strings of pearls, each drop seemingly aimed at softening his heart. "Dad, do you remember, when I was 10 and had that high fever? I almost didn't make it," she said, her voice thick with grievance and dependence. "You stayed by my side for 3 days and nights. You said you'd summon the best doctors in the entire province if it meant saving me." Ezra Lee also seized the moment to redden his eyes, his voice choked with emotion. "Director Ning, Myra has always said that you raised her with your own hands, that you're the closest person to her in this world." Every word they spoke was a gamble. They were betting that the father valued loyalty and righteousness, that after raising Myra Ning for 18 years, even without blood ties, there must still be deep familial affection. Unfortunately for them, today they were destined to miscalculate. I stood quietly to the side, silently sneering. I have complete confidence in my father, not only because of our relationship in my past life, where he still sought to clear my name even when the evidence of me leaking state secrets abroad seemed irrefutable, but also because of that earth-shattering secret about her true identity, something the imposter Myra Ning still knows nothing about to this day. "All of you, shut up," father suddenly roared, his voice booming like thunder. He shielded me behind him in one swift motion, the collar of his Zhongshan suit slightly heaving with anger. "My daughter would never do such despicable things." He stared at the trembling Myra Ning, his eyes filled with undisguised disgust and contempt. "Lena is of the Ning family's blood. The shameless acts you, an imposter, would stoop to. She would never even consider them, let alone do them." Father and I exchanged a glance, both seeing understanding and trust in each other's eyes. Myra Ning clearly realized there was no possibility of dragging me down with her, but she still seemed to cling to a faint, unrealistic hope, believing that she could at least earn her father's forgiveness. Her face turned deathly pale as she trembled and clutched at her father's pant leg, pleading desperately, "Dad, Dad, when I was brought here, I was just a baby in swaddling clothes. I knew nothing. I was truly innocent." Suddenly, she turned to me, tears streaming down her face like rain on pear blossoms. "Sister, it really wasn't my fault that you were left to wander outside. I swear, in this life and the next, I'm willing to work like an ox or a horse to atone for my sins. Please. Please forgive me, won't you?" At that moment, my brother walked over expressionlessly, carrying a heavy medical kit. He didn't even glance at the two people on the ground, heading straight to our father. "Dad, I've already checked her pulse. Myra Ning is 1.5 months pregnant. It's Ezra Lee's child." Myra Ning's hand, which had been tightly clutching our father's pant leg, suddenly went limp and dropped. The veins on the father's forehead bulged as he suddenly lifted his foot and kicked over the nearby coffee table. "Good, very good. When you stole Lena's identity, you knew nothing. But now, stealing Lena's man, that was entirely your own doing, wasn't it?" He pointed straight at Myra Ning, each word seeming to be forced through clenched teeth. 20 years ago, when your heartless, wicked mother swapped the babies, she should have foreseen this day would come." Myra Ning felt as if struck by lightning. "What? Switched? No, wasn't it a mistake? A mistake? Ha, it was intentional." Her father's voice was filled with rage and regret. "I asked your biological mother to take care of my pregnant wife, but she took advantage of my wife's difficult labor to swap her own bastard child with my precious daughter." All color drained from Myra Ning's face in an instant. "You mentioned the high fever you had at 10. Do you remember what I said next? I've already lost your mother. I can't lose you too. I thought you were her flesh and blood." Ezra Lee's gaze darted back and forth between me and Myra Ning, his arm around her already frozen stiff. My brother sneered and seized the moment to add, "By the way, let me tell you one more thing. Myra Ning, your biological father's surname was also Ning. So you never changed your name, not because we showed you any mercy, but because that was always your name." Myra Ning trembled all over and suddenly let out a crazed scream. No, that's impossible. You're lying, Mom clearly said. Your mother didn't want you to know the truth even in death. Father cut her off, out of respect for 18 years of shared history. I never exposed it. Who knew I'd end up raising such an ungrateful wretch? Dragon begets dragon, phoenix begets phoenix, and the son of a rat will dig holes. Her father couldn't even bear to look at her, disgusted. If your mother could swap babies, you're capable of drugging my daughter. Sent to the branch factory for 2 years of reflection. And what do? Seduce her fiancé, then turn around and frame her. The Ning family raised you for 18 whole years, yet we couldn't wash away the filth in your bones. Ezra Lee's face turned ashen, but he still clung to the last shred of dignity. Trying to speak in his own defense, Director Ning, about this matter, Ezra Lee, her father's gaze was filled with bitter disappointment, as if lamenting his failure to live up to expectations. I must have been blind. Back when you were innovating techniques in the workshop and exceeding production targets for 3 straight months, I thought you were a promising talent with a bright future. Never did I imagine you'd be so bewitched by such trash, Ezra Lee. If you can't even keep your pants on, how do you deserve to be an advanced producer? Ezra Lee's face turned from pale to ashen, then to a deathly gray. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees with a thud and kowtowed heavily several times. Director, I was momentarily confused. That night, I was drugged. I never thought that one time would get her pregnant. Father just looked at him coldly. The elder brother picked up the medical kit and jerked his chin at the two on the ground. I don't care about you two. If you want treatment, go to the factory hospital. Don't dirty my sister's eyes. The lights in the factory's grand hall stung the eyes. I stood at the side of the podium, my gaze sweeping over the sea of workers below. Ezra Lee sat in the most conspicuous spot in the 3rd row, his work uniform impeccably pressed, yet unable to conceal the despair and panic in his eyes. As for Myra Ning, the so-called frail woman Ezra Lee kept insisting would die from a miscarriage, she was now perfectly fine, huddled in a corner. Comrades, my father's voice echoed through the assembly hall. Today's factory-wide meeting is called to clarify some widely circulated and severely distorted rumors within our factory. The venue fell silent instantly, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I took a deep breath and pulled out the prepared documents from the file folder. This is Comrade Myra Ning's prenatal examination records from the branch factory clinic, I said, holding up the documents to ensure everyone could clearly see the official seal and date, 6 weeks pregnant. With the examination conducted half a month ago, the room erupted in an uproar. According to Comrade Ezra Lee, Myra Ning was bullied by thugs a month ago. I deliberately paused. The timeline doesn't add up. Ezra Lee suddenly stood up, his face turning crimson. Lena Ning, this is a violation of personal privacy. Comrade Ezra Lee, father spoke coldly. Please sit down, mind your words and actions. Ezra Lee's face turned from red to pale, and in the end, he slumped back into his seat dejectedly. I continued to state the facts in a clear and calm voice. Coincidentally, Comrade Ezra Lee happened to go to the region for a 3-day study session a month and a half ago. I pulled out the second document from the file folder. This is his business trip assignment form and train ticket stub, with the destination being the county town where the branch factory is located. The meeting room erupted in chaos, with waves of gasps and exclamations. I clearly saw several female worker representatives from the front rows exchanging looks of disdain and disgust, casting scornful glances at Ezra Lee and Myra Ning. So, the child Comrade Myra Ning is carrying is Comrade Ezra Lee's. The two fabricated the story about her being harassed by thugs to gain sympathy and return to the main factory. My voice was not loud, but it once again silenced the entire room. They had already committed serious misconduct during our engagement. Possibly even earlier. Myra Ning struggled desperately. You're lying. It was clearly those hooligans. Enough. Her father interrupted sharply. Comrades from the Public Security Bureau have already conducted investigations and gathered evidence at your sub-factory and nearby villages. No serious public security incidents occurred during that period. This lie ends here. Myra Ning fell silent abruptly, like a chicken with its neck wrung. Now, I announced the disciplinary decision regarding Comrade Ezra Lee. Her father produced a document stamped with a red seal. after deliberation and approval by the higher authorities, Comrade Ezra Lee is hereby stripped of his position as workshop director and his title of advanced producer. He is demoted to an ordinary worker and will be transferred immediately to the newly established support factory in the northwestern Gobi Desert, pending further evaluation of his conduct. Ezra Lee's face turned ashen, his shoulders trembling slightly beneath his work clothes. He abruptly closed his eyes, as if trying to shut out the voice that was sealing his fate. Meanwhile, Myra Ning slumped in the corner like a pile of mud, her eyes vacant, murmuring something unconsciously under her breath. Suddenly, she turned to Ezra Lee, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Brother Ezra, but Ezra Lee avoided her gaze as if she were the plague. I slowly descended from the podium and walked toward Ezra Lee under the gaze of the crowd. "Ezra Lee, you betrayed me, betrayed the Ning family, and ruined your own bright future. All for someone like this," I said softly, ensuring only he could hear. "Was it worth it?" His lips trembled, but not a single word escaped them. I turned and walked toward Myra Ning, whose eyes burned with hatred so intense it felt almost tangible. "Lena Ning," she gnashed her teeth. "Are you satisfied now?" "Not quite." I shook my head with a faint smile. "This is just the beginning. Myra Ning, your real show is yet to come." After the meeting, I timed it perfectly and deliberately bumped into the absent-minded Ezra Lee in the corridor of the factory hospital. "Comrade Lee, here for a follow-up." I feigned concern as I spoke. He looked at me warily. "Lena Ning, what are you up to again?" I simply pulled out another copy of the lab report and handed it to him. "Don't be nervous. I just want you to take a look at this." The paper clearly recorded the drug residue in Myra Ning's body, aconitine. This poisonous herb only grows in the mountain valleys near the branch factory. Who do you think would have easier access to it? Her or me? Impossible. Ezra Lee's voice was hoarse. How could she be so heartless? I watched with satisfaction as his world crumbled before him. Pulling the final sheet from the folder, Dad sent people to investigate where she was sent down this past week. I unfolded the investigation report. At least 7 local hoodlums admitted to having relations with her in the 2 days after you left. "Comrade Lee, tell me, what are the odds she just happened to get pregnant from that one time with you, to secure her return, to climb onto your privileged branch? She worked much harder than you ever imagined." I leaned closer to his ear. "Now, guess why she could be so ruthless as to abort her own child?" Ezra Lee suddenly grabbed my arm, his nails almost digging into my flesh. "You're lying. You must be lying." In his eyes, once brimming with ambition and vigor, now only madness and despair remained, along with a trace of overwhelming hatred from being deceived. "No doubt, Myra Ning's days ahead won't be easy." How ironic. Ezra Lee, this self-proclaimed clever and calculating man, was fooled by the same woman in both of his lifetimes. In his previous life, he destroyed me for the sake of the bastard child in that woman's belly. In this life, he destroyed himself with his own hands. The Ning family disdained dirtying their own hands, but Ezra Lee's sordid deeds had long been spread far and wide. As soon as he arrived at the Gobi Desert in the northwest, he was assigned to dig foundations, enduring wind and sun. Once an advanced producer in the factory, he was now worse off than an ordinary laborer, and it was said he was often cheated out of his work points by the foreman. The factory kept demoting me. And within less than half a year, I went from being a technical backbone to a handyman boiling water and cooking in the workshed. Another 6 months passed, and I learned from my brother about the final fate of those 2 individuals. That afternoon, my brother tossed the workers daily onto the coffee table. In an inconspicuous corner of the social news section was printed a brutal murder case at a construction site. Ezra Lee wanted to divorce Myra Ning. My brother handed me a freshly washed apple, but Myra Ning, armed with evidence of his domestic violence, refused to agree no matter what. The 2 of them tormented each other like this on the Gobi Desert for a year until Ezra Lee couldn't take it anymore and beat her to death with a shovel. Even worse, he buried the body in a sand pile at the construction site, trying to cover up the crime. I took a bite of the crisp, sweet apple, and then, death penalty. After being caught, he confessed quickly, saying he'd rather be shot than see that face again or stay in that godforsaken place any longer. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting dappled patterns on the newspaper, rendering that brief report indistinct under the fragmented light. What a pity. I didn't get to see it with my own eyes. Pity what? Better not to dirty your sight. My elder brother reached out and ruffled my hair. The warm sunlight bathed me, dispelling the last trace of gloom. My new life had only just begun.